It should be recording. Yeah, we're good. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, no problem. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I'm glad to be here with you in beautiful St. George. It's a little warmer here than it is in Salt Lake, so I'm happy to have made the trek here. Let's see if I want to advance. They're gonna follow. Oh,
Yes.
it's bringing my notes with them.
Oh, I don't think we can see your notes up there. Oh, the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I guess it's not the big still, but
Presenter notes are showing up.
oh, they are now.
Yeah. I can have your presenter notes on here too for you.
Yeah, and I can put them on my computer too. Either way.
Sorry, you want to just regular Suzanne? I'll pass it.
Oh, is it just this side, student?
Yeah, those are her notes, the black.
Those are your notes. Isn't that for the set?
No, that's notes. It just makes it look.
Oh, I see. Okay. And that's okay. I can use this too. It's just so you have a clean. No, you're good. Sorry, recording. That's okay. Let's see. Okay, so it looks like it's on the slide, but like it's not. It's just with the, or it's on the slide. I scooted it up, so it's the notes, but it's, yeah. This, yeah, it's part of your slide. That one. This is your notes right here. Yeah. But this is part of your slide. This is your notes. Okay, my bad. No, you're good. Sorry about that. You're good. No, you're good. Rookie move. You're just fine. You're totally fine. Okay. So like that's your notes. Cool. But that's perfect. Okay, sorry about that. No, you're good. Okay. Back in progress. Sorry about that. So my name is Carrie Ketchum. I'm the Executive Director of Utah Dispute Resolution, and we primarily serve the community as mediators. Really just provide anyone in the state of Utah mediation, no matter what their income. Most cases in the 3rd District Court that are contested, it's required to go to mediation. And so sometimes people do or don't have the means to hire a private mediator. And so we're there to kind of fill that need, really, again, no matter what the income. And so every year I mediate hundreds of cases, but in addition to that, also train new mediators who are looking to acquire court roster status. And then occasionally get the privilege of joining these kinds of presentations and folks like you to just spread the good word about conflict resolution. So I, outside of work, am a mother to 2 teenagers. And so I get to sharpen my skills and be humbled at home on the daily, really. 16 and 15 right now. And so it's definitely the skills I've learned as a mediator and in the conflict resolution world have definitely helped at home. If I'm not working, I'm typically on a mountain bike trail or on my dirt bike and camping. So many beautiful places in Utah to do that. So today I'm just going to share a few things with you about the world of conflict resolution. And wow, I just skipped way ahead. This is a good mouse on there. All right. Oh, is this a touch screen? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. I wholeheartly believe that all of us have access to a peaceful life, no matter what it brings us, and really no matter what issues arise on our journey. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about our own personal attitudes about conflict, ways to move through to the other side of conflict, understanding why it exists, sources of it, and really just how to work in our world towards greater peace and empathy for others in our lives. Back in 2002, my best friend, Angie, called me one morning and let me know that her sister had been murdered the night before. This has been years ago, but this was kind of a gang-related incident. And she was taken to a house where they were exchanging methamphetamines, and her boyfriend was tied up and put in the trunk of the car. And she was put in the back seat of the car, and along the journey to their destination, he escaped out of the trunk of the car. And so they took her instead. And so she was shot and dumped in the Jordan River. I learned during that experience that it's painful. It's hard for families to navigate. It's hard for people to understand the system, hard for people to even know kind of where to start beyond a tragedy like that. So I really just want to start today off with a bit of gratitude for all of you. I'm sure that in your work, in your world, this is something that you see, something that you deal with, and helping families navigate these scary situations has got to be difficult. So there's a need for what you do, and I just want to appreciate all of you today for the work that you do. All right, so I want to share one of my experiences with you as a mediator. I got called to one of the hospitals in Salt Lake City. I won't say which one, but there was some issues within one of the departments at the hospital. So I was asked to come in and what I thought was mediate the conflict there, but what it turned out to be was a facilitation. So I walk into the room with the HR woman who had hired me, and quickly learned that this was going to be a lot more than I'd bargained for. There was a table of about 18 chairs sitting around it. Typically, my work is just myself as the neutral and then two parties, one on each side. But I quickly learned that I was a little out of my comfort zone and had to really just dig deep into my toolbox to figure out how to navigate this situation. And so what I'd learned in this setting was that there were brand new interns that were there, first-year residents who were in this department. And there were also 30-year seasoned doctors in this situation, all of them working together and really just in a situation where there was a huge gap, a generational gap, a gap in experience, a gap in understanding of protocol and things that needed to happen in the workplace. And so there was an extra layer of stress because of all the issues that they were seeing. So what I did was just went around this circle and gave everybody the opportunity to really kind of just express how they were feeling. It was pretty cathartic, I think, for most of them. And we were able to navigate this conversation in a way that didn't feel directed towards anyone in particular, but opened up the space for them to be able to talk to one another and let them know how they were feeling about the issues. So it occurred to me during that situation that this is probably not the only setting in which this is happening. There's probably, issues within workplaces all over. But really, it was an opportunity for us to just understand what was going on and to be able to work through it and to help them come to a healthy environment and move forward. Not all of those situations are a quick fix. I'm hopeful that they continued the conversation beyond me being there. But just opening the door for that conversation helps people understand where to begin and move through conflict. So one of the things that I've also learned is that conflict is one of the things that is uncomfortable in our lives. It's not fun. I think we can all think about situations in our own lives, within our own families. Maybe someone's gone through a divorce, just situations with siblings and parents, and it's difficult and uncomfortable. And in conflict, it's easy to let our minds wander and to think about all the what ifs and really just start to go down the rabbit hole. It really is the perfect setting conflict for those things to happen. And so while it's important to recognize that, it's also important to know that it will spill over into our lives. So if we're experiencing conflict at home, it's possible that somehow we're bringing that to work with us. But likewise, harmony. If we have harmony in our worlds, in our personal lives, that also spills over to our work and the rest of our environments that we are in. It's interesting to understand a little bit about the impact that conflict has in our society. 2/3 of US workers experience instability at work and are 3 times more likely to be unsatisfied with their jobs and 2 times more likely to leave their job within the next year. Employees spend approximately 2.8 hours each week involved in conflict. Now, that could be something at work. It could be something at home. Maybe they are going through a divorce and bringing that conflict with them, inadvertently, maybe not even intentionally. But that amount of hours equates to $259 billion in hours paid that are focused on conflict instead of productivity. So disengaged employees have a 15% lower profitability for a company. And employees say that toxic behavior at work is the biggest predictor of burnout and attrition. Replacing an employee amounts to about 33% of their annual salary. And conflict management is one of the things that a lot of leadership in the workplace say they don't have a good understanding or training in. So it's just important to note, that really the cost on our society of unresolved conflict. So today I'd like to share a few things about our personal attitudes on conflict, just sources of conflict, where does it come from? Understanding what underlying interests are, the whys in conflict, and our conflict styles. And some communication in conflict, which includes active listening and then asking neutral questions. Adopting an attitude of curiosity. Okay. So if you all have a piece of paper, if not, you can just use your phone. And if not, just even think in your mind for a moment, just take a minute and think about the words that come to your mind when you think of the word conflict. We'll just take a minute and just write down some of the things, or just think about some of the things that come to mind when you hear the word conflict. All right, does anybody want to share? You can just kind of shout out if you want any of the words that come to mind.
Tension.
Tension.
Avoidance.
Avoidance.
High stakes.
High stakes, yep.
Misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding.
Angry from Abby Taylor.
Angry, yep.
Hurt.
Hurt.
Apprehension.
Apprehension. Entrenched, good word.
Disagreement and misunderstanding.
Disagreement, misunderstanding. Say that again. Assumptions.
Battle.
It's also a relief.
Battle. Relief, okay. Yeah, release. Frustration.
In the chat, we have battle, convincing, making a point, and lower productivity.
I like it. Change. These are great, good. This is exactly similar to the list that I typically get in these trainings, and a lot of the things that are on my list as well. It's true. It's one of those things that exists. It's part of our lives, but it's uncomfortable. And it's not fun. Sometimes there are high stakes. Sometimes there is misunderstandings. People are entrenched in their positions. And it's hard to understand a little bit about why we're in it, but there's also relief and some release. And so today I'd like to suggest to all of you to consider conflict as an opportunity. Thinking of conflict as an opportunity reminds us really that something in our lives needs attention. Conflict reminds us that something in our lives needs attention. And we get to visit whatever that is and learn and grow from it. I'm sure there are some in this room who have in their own worlds experienced conflict in their families. I know in my own family right now, within my siblings, there's some issues going on. And I wish it was easier to mediate my own family than it is. It's just not. But I think we all can reflect on our own lives and know about a conflict that we've experienced or maybe even experiencing right now. It's an unsettling place to be. It makes us feel physically sick, but it really can also be an opportunity for growth, for us to assess what the issues are and to learn from them and to move through the conflict. I really like this quote by John Paul Lederach. Conflict can be understood as the motor of change, that which keeps relationships and social structures honest, alive, and dynamically responsive to the human needs, aspirations, and growth. So one of the reasons that we experience conflict is perspective. So dictionary.com says perspective is the way that a person's perceptions, values, and opinions affect their story. It's influenced by factors like personality, socioeconomic status, cultural background, education, spirituality, and language. These details all inform a person's beliefs and attitudes, giving them a distinct way of perceiving the world, which in turn shapes the narrative. In fact, the word perspective stems from the Latin perspectus, which means view. So a couple days ago, I was driving in the car with my 16-year-old daughter, and she knows just about everything. So it's pretty fascinating when we have a disagreement. And so I had to remind her that no matter what she sees is going on in her world, and no matter how much she knows, that she can still be respectful to her parents, still be respectful to the people in her circle. And she said, I don't disrespect you guys. And so I thought, okay, well, let me understand this just a little bit more. So I just asked her, well, what does respect mean to you? And she just went on to tell me that, it means I'm not doing things on purpose. I'm not doing anything on purpose to get you to get in trouble or to have you guys mad at me. And so we had to have a little bit more of a discussion about respect, but it occurred to me that we had a completely different idea of what that word meant. And so it reminded me to just dig a little bit deeper and find out what her perspective of that was. So in addition to the difference in perspective in conflict, we can rely on Maslow's hierarchy of needs to help us and inform us of other sources of conflict. Our basic needs of food and shelter, even those being unmet, as we all know right now, there's a lot of people in our world that are wondering, how am I going to pay rent next month? How am I going to be able to make my house payment next month? How am I going to make my food budget last this whole month with the price of food? So just those factors alone can bring conflict into our lives. Limited resources, just limited time, limited money, space, limited people in the workplace. Maybe you're in a workplace where there's a shortage of people and you're taking on the lion's share of the work. That alone can cause conflict. Just differences in style related to our personality, our parenting styles, our work styles, our work ethic, and then our allegiances to our families, our social community, religious affiliations, and work and school affiliations. All of those things are perspectives. And then all of these differences that we have are sources of conflict, or can be sources of conflict. So picture an iceberg, if you will, and really what we see of the iceberg is only the top. There's so much underneath. In fact, the bulk of the iceberg and the strength of it is underneath the surface. And so visualizing conflict like an iceberg will help you remember that what is on the surface is only a small part of the conflict. Really, what's under the surface is the bulk of what the source of conflict could be. So if we take the time to learn about that part, we can really get to a place of understanding perspectives, understanding the sources of conflict, and we can work towards achieving a middle ground. It's important, again, to understand that what's on the top is really unlikely to be the source of conflict. It might be what's happening right now, but what's underneath is what we need to get to. And I'm going to share with you a few ways how to do that. So I mediated a divorce case. It's been about a year or so ago, and typically in a divorce matter, there are certain things that we go through. There's the parenting plan, you know, there's real property, personal property, things like that. And so I have my own little list of all the things that I tackle when I'm talking to somebody about a divorce and making sure that we go through all the things that are on this list. Well, this couple came in and this was a Zoom mediation, which is pretty typical these days. In fact, it's pretty rare that any of them are in person. And so in the Zoom, each person has their own breakout room and I do the shuttling. So I just move between the Zoom rooms and manage the mediation that way. So this couple came in and I got them both settled in their own space with their attorneys and just did my opening statement and then allowed them to share their statements with me of what it was they were there to accomplish. And so I learned pretty quickly that these parties didn't have children together and they didn't have any real property together. So I thought, okay, easy. A couple of the hardest things are off the list. And so we can just move forward with whatever else is on their minds today. So they'd been separated for a while. So all the personal property had already been divided. And at this point, what I came to realize is that they had some dogs that they had together during their marriage. And so two of the dogs were alive and one had passed away. And so they had, since they'd been separated for a while, figured out how to kind of co-parent the dogs and had this parenting plan, if you will, for these pups. And they were just week on and week off. So every Sunday night they would exchange the pups and have turns with them. And so oddly to me, the biggest issue that day was the one who had passed away. And so I had to start asking some questions and digging a little deeper to figure out what is it about this one that has passed away that's brought all these issues to the surface. And so as things started to unfold, I learned that both of them had, a feeling that, gosh, I did the lion's share of taking this dog for walks. The other one was, I did the lion's share of purchasing food and insurance and taking him to the vet and all these things. And so that dog had been cremated and one of the parties had all the ashes. And so they had both contributed significantly to the life of this dog while they were together. And both felt like they needed to have some of the ashes, but the trust in that relationship was gone. And so he did not believe that he was going to get his share of the ashes directly from her. And as I started to dig a little bit deeper, learned that he intended on getting a tattoo, which apparently you can now put ashes in. I did not know that, but He needed a certain amount of the ashes to be able to do that. So, so what we did that day was, I thought, let's just divide these like everything else we do in a divorce case equally and just each get their own share. But again, we were back at this place where there was no trust and he did not believe that she was gonna give him his equal division of the ashes. And so we decided that they were gonna take them back to the crematorium and have a third person do that division and then give them to both parties. And he wanted a greater share for this tattoo, but it turns out he just had to modify the tattoo so that he'd get the equal share. So under the surface, I learned that we had this tattoo, we had a lack of trust that either person was going to divide them equally. And so it took some time. That was about 2.5, almost 3 hour mediation to just discover really what it was that each person needed. So luckily we were able to resolve that one, but it did take some time to work through that. One of the components at work in conflict is our conflict styles. It's important to understand that we all have different styles of conflict. How do we show up in conflict? And there are 5 of them. There's the competing style, which is assertive and can be uncooperative. A power-oriented mode, when competing, an individual pursues his or her own concerns at the other person's expense, using whatever power seems appropriate to win their position. Competing might mean standing up for your rights, defending a position you believe is correct, or simply just trying to win. I think we can probably all think of someone in our lives who has this style of conflict. There's the collaborating style, which is both assertive and cooperative. An individual attempts to work with the other person to find a solution that fully satisfies the concerns of all involved in the conflict. Collaborating between 2 people might take the form of exploring the disagreement to learn from each other's insights, resolving some condition that would otherwise have them competing for resources, or confronting and trying to find a creative solution to an interpersonal problem. There's the compromising style, which is an intermediate in both assertive and cooperative. When compromising, an individual has the objective to find an expedient, mutually acceptable middle ground for the conflict. It falls between competing and accommodating, giving up more than competing, but less than accommodating. Likewise, it addresses an issue more directly than avoiding, but doesn't explore it in as much depth as collaborating. It might mean splitting the difference in an exchange of concessions to seek a quick middle ground. Then there's the avoiding. Again, I think we can all think of somebody that's probably in every one of these conflict styles, but certainly the avoiding. Avoiding is unassertive and uncooperative. When avoiding, an individual does not immediately pursue his or her own concerns or those of the other party. He or she simply just does not address the conflict. We've all seen that picture of a head being buried in the sand. And that is exactly what this is. It might take the diplomatic form of sidestepping an issue, postponing an issue until a better time, or simply just withdrawing from a threatening situation. And the accommodating style, which is unassertive, but also uncooperative, the opposite of competing. When accommodating, an individual neglects his or her own concerns to satisfy the concerns of the other person. There's an element of self-sacrifice in this mode. Accommodating might take the form of selfless generosity or charity, obeying another person's orders when you prefer not to, and yielding to another person's point of view. I remember taking this test at the beginning of my training back in 2017, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be a mediator. Of course, I'm a collaborator. Of course, that's my style. Well, it turns out I was between avoiding and accommodating, which really made sense. If I think back to my upbringing, I was the oldest of 5 kids. And so in a lot of ways, it was easier for me to just accommodate and kind of give up what I needed to avoid any kind of conflict. or just avoid it altogether and bury my head in the sand and think it was all just gonna magically go away. So all 5 of these modes are useful in some situations. Each of them represents a useful set of social skills. And so our conventional wisdom recognizes, for example, oops, sorry, that in the, for example, 2 heads are better than 1. That's the collaborating style, but it also says kill your enemies with kindness. That's the accommodating style. Split the difference. Let's compromise. Or leave well enough alone, which is the avoider. And might makes right, which is the competing style. So the effectiveness of any given conflict handling mode depends on the requirements of the specific situation and the skill with which you use that mode. You're capable of using all 5 conflict styles. I think in general, based on our upbringing, our predisposition, we all naturally gravitate towards one, and maybe we've built skills in one. But it's important to know that we aren't characterized as having a rigid style. We certainly can move in between different styles, especially if we know what they are and what we typically gravitate towards. So the conflict behaviors that you use are really just the result of how, just your personal disposition, and how the requirements in which you find yourself. So understanding that maybe you are an accommodator, or maybe you are a competitor. All of those are great and they all serve us well in certain situations, but knowing that we can move outside of those modes and move more towards a collaborative mode when we want to really dig deep and move forward with a conflict with resolve. Oftentimes we can just put a Band-Aid on things and it will go away and we can just set it aside, but it's going to come back. So collaborating, digging underneath that iceberg for those underlying interests are what's going to really help us get to the root of the issue and resolve the conflict. Okay. Now that we've talked a little bit about our conflict styles, and maybe you even recognize which one you fall under, which is great. It's helpful to know that. Now it's also helpful to know and recognize that the other person that you're in conflict with, you can maybe recognize what their conflict style is as well and work with that. Even in a situation with a significant other, you might recognize what their conflict style is and can work with that and know some of the tools to get to a place of being able to work through and move through the conflict. So once we've understood what those are, we can really get to a better understanding and work on what the underlying interests are. One of the ways that we can do that is by active listening. So this quote from Adam Grant is really great. I'm going to read it to you guys. The best way to open people's minds isn't to argue with them. It's to listen to them. When people feel understood, they become less defensive and more reflective and develop less extreme, more nuanced views. Productive disagreements begin with curiosity, not persuasion. So in order to become an effective listener, it's important to understand some of the barriers to listening and to active listening. Some of those barriers, I find this statistic fascinating. As speakers, we speak about 125 words per minute. I think I probably have that beat. I usually speak a lot faster than that. To my detriment. But as listeners, we can process about 500 words per minute. So you can see there's a pretty good gap between my speaking and all of you listening, which really leaves a lot of time and room for other thoughts to come into your mind, for your minds to wander. And so it's a pretty amazing difference, but it means that we need to be aware that, hey, am I listening to this person? Or am I reminding myself that I need to put bread on the grocery list? Got to pick up some milk after school today, those kinds of things. So awareness is what that's about. There's other environmental barriers. So this might actually be something that you're experiencing right now in this room. Are other people speaking? The air conditioning, is it cold in here? There's physiological barriers, which maybe is a hearing deficiency for some. Maybe just sitting too long and having aching legs could be a barrier. And being preoccupied with other thoughts, even right now. Did the kids get to school on time? Did the dog get fed? Those kinds of things. It might even just be an overload of information from this presentation that is becoming a barrier. So being an effective listener is not saying, I agree with you. I understand you. Oh yeah, that happened to me too. It's not trying to analyze or solve someone else's problems. It's not judging who is right or wrong or giving advice. So effective listening is seeking to understand, withholding judgment, talking and interrupting less, attending to nonverbal cues, taking notes and paraphrasing or restating what someone said to you so that they know that you've heard them. So asking brief questions for clarification to get an understanding. So as you can see, there is a lot of components when being an active listener. I think even now in our time with phones, with computers, setting those down and just taking a moment to be a good listener, an active listener will help people feel understood and heard. So let's take a look at this example of listening. See if that starts for us.
Sure, you know. And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. And I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
You have a nail. You have.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it, I'm just, yeah, maybe the nail is caught.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need, I think what you need is to get the nail.
See,
Okay, fine, listen.
it's just. Sometimes it's like, there's this achy. I don't know what it is. That must be very well, all, no, my sweaters are snagged, they all. Oh.
I just love that video. It's so funny. But really a perfect example of the importance of listening. So now that we've talked about listening, let's talk about the other part of communication, which is questions. So in my opinion, the best way to ask questions is by adopting an attitude of curiosity. Not making somebody feel like they're on the spot, not making it feel like they are being interrogated, but really just being curious and wondering, you know, what is going on here? And so adopting an attitude of curiosity will really help us understand those underlying interests under the iceberg. So some types of questions are open-ended questions, and those might sound like, what would you like to see happen? Or What do you want us to do to help you in this situation? You can also ask, what is at the heart of the matter for you? Or what are your hopes and fears if your current needs are unmet? There's closed or direct questions. Did you feel that was unfair? Or is this what you meant when you said that? Do you agree with this proposed solution? Did you understand what the other person said? And can you confirm the deadline for this project? There's directive questions. An example might be, what will happen if this conflict continues? How can we repair the damage? There's leading questions. What they did is unbelievable. Don't you agree? That's an example. And we have hypothetical questions. An example of that might be, what would you changing your break time look like? What would you do if you quit your job? And what does that look like for you long term? Adopting an attitude of curiosity will allow for the questions to convey neutrality. So one of the principles of productive questions is focusing on the present and the future, not the past. There's not a whole lot we can do about the past. It's our best teacher. We can certainly learn from it. But when asking questions and moving forward with resolving conflict, they need to be forward focused and focusing on what happened now and what's going to happen in the future. So some examples of questions, forward focused questions might be, are you willing to have a new conversation about the financial plans? What would a new summer vacation schedule with the kids look like? What's the first step for you if you want to change the current situation? And what do you need to have happen to move forward? Those types of questions will really help you get to the bottom line and to understand what it is that someone else is seeing. So really, when we come to the table in conflict and we understand that there are different things at play, there's different perspectives, there's potentially different basic unmet needs. Somebody might be at that conflict having a horrible day and have just had an issue with a spouse or a family member at home, and then coming to work with all of these things at play and bringing that to the table. And so more conflict potentially can arise. So understanding those underlying interests, understanding someone else's perspective. How are they seeing things? Are they seeing things the same way that you are? And if not, we get to ask these neutral questions to understand. Being an active listener and really taking the time to let somebody feel heard and understood. Just simple body language, being attentive, putting away the phone or the computer, and just taking the time to really be present and to let someone know that they're being heard. Some of the things I love to do the most are just restating what I've heard. If somebody's telling me something, I can reframe it. I can restate it in a way that helps them know I've heard them and that they're being listened to. It goes a long way. It goes a long way for them to be understood and to know that you care enough to hear what they're saying and are present and attentive in what it is they're trying to say. I often think about my teenagers in these situations because they're growing up in a crazy time right now. I mean, I think every generation could probably say that as we move forward in the world, but just setting down the phone, just being present and listening to them is always something that I'm working on. So asking the right questions, being an active listener, acknowledging that we all see things differently. Our unique perspectives add value to our lives. I remember being younger and my mom would ask me all the time, do you just want a whole world full of Carries? And someday I probably said, yeah, like that would be fairly easy. But no, of course I don't. What a boring place that would be if it were just a bunch of me. And so understanding that everyone brings value to this world, everyone's perspective brings value and color to our lives is important. We can all learn from that. Understanding that we all see things differently and really just focusing on that iceberg. Understanding that there's underlying interests when we have conflict. It's not just what's on the surface, it really is what's all the way underneath. And so taking the time to discover what that is by active listening and using neutral questions is extremely helpful. I do dream of a world free of conflict, but as we all know, it's just part of life. It really is. And again, it gives us the opportunity to visit what's amiss, what's out of place, and what is it that needs attention in our world right now. I know in my own family with conflict, it's tough. We have to sometimes navigate our family dinners and figure out who's coming and who's not, or do we invite this person or do we not invite that person? And so it shifts our lives, it shifts the way that we are able to connect and move forward in a cohesive way with one another. So it reminds me that, you know, it's a good time to just assess and to sit down and figure out what is really going on, what's at the heart of the matter. And I can do that by asking questions and just discovering really what is the issue. It's crucial to just understand, you know, for you guys, I think your work is so important. It's crucial. I think that the work that you all do in our community is so important. And that alone is a stressor, I'm sure. It's something that we all need. And gosh, I'm personally thankful for all the work that you guys do, but it can't be easy. And so the things that you deal with, you know, that possibly get taken home after work and vice versa can be a source of an issue or a potential source of conflict. So making sure that you implement self-care is so important. Take a walk, take a bike ride, do all the things that you love to do that are important to you, and just, you know, let your minds kind of work through all of the things that you need to. We can't avoid conflict. It really is just a part of life. But what we can do is take care of ourselves to minimize it and implement some of these strategies when we do experience it to help us move through it. The one thing that another thing I've learned in this work is that it really is a snowball effect. I know my husband's mentioned to me a few times that since I've started this work, our lives are just a little bit better. And so taking these skills and taking them, you know, into the workplace, taking them home, it's a snowball effect. It will make your own personal life just a little bit better. It'll make your work life and home life just a little bit better when you take the time to really just dig a little bit deeper, to be that active listener, to ask those questions with an attitude of curiosity, and to just understand where someone else is showing up in a potential situation of conflict. So I just wish you all the best in your journey, in your work, and appreciate being here today. So I guess we'll just take a few minutes. If anyone has questions or any thoughts on anything I can answer, I'm happy to do that, because I think I got done a little quicker than I anticipated.
That's perfect, right on
Okay,
time.
good. Okay, good. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you for
Carrie.
being so tech savvy. That was great.
We really felt like this was such a relevant topic. Not only are we dealing with conflicts with clients and victims, but also as we try to collaborate sometimes with our partners, there can be conflicts. So just such good information. So we will take a break and come back at 11.
I love that.
There you are. This whole time.